So here we are. Unfortunately, this is like really overgrown. My dad used to take me to this quite a bit, and he would talk to me about it. And you know, at that age, I didn't really understand a whole lot. But the monument here, which this is really out of focus. Sorry about that. It's Fort Swatara of the French and Indian War, erected in the fall of 1755. It stood 500 feet south of this spot, directly north of the run of water flowing east and west. Commanded by Captain Frederick Smith of Chester County of the 1st Battalion of the Pennsylvania Provincial Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel Conrad Weiser commanding, which Conrad Weiser is the name. He's one of the most influential men in Pennsylvania. And that's a place at some point I want to go to, his homestead. Finally abandoned 1758, Captain Lieutenant Samuel Allen in command. It consisted of a blockhouse pierced for musketry fire and surrounded by a stockade. This boulder and tablet placed by the Lebanon County Historical Society in 1932. So somewhere south of this is where the fort originally stood. Now there's nothing, as far as I know, nothing that exists anymore, but you can look around here and you see the mountain range, and it's actually over that direction is where the Swatara Gap is, and that's a gap in the mountain chain where the Swatara Creek would come through, and that was a major pathway that the Indians during the French and Indian War period had come through, and they would have had their battles with the settlers. So this was quite the dangerous area, and forts like Fort Swatara were a gathering ground for the settlers. And these forts weren't necessarily something like you think. I mean, some of them were quite large, but a lot of them were nothing more than what you would consider a regular sized house today, and they were just really fortified, and they'd have like those slots in for musketry fire and that type of stuff, but they weren't what you think of. At some point I want to go over it's a town called Richland, and it's between Richland and another town called Newmanstown, where there's a Fort Zellers, and that's actually still standing today, and then you can get a better idea of what those forts actually look like. But it really is, it's a beautiful, not only these little beautiful valleys, and this is where it stood, and it would have been 500 feet south, somewhere over that direction is where the fort had originally stood, and as a major part of our history, it was one of these French and Indian forts that was so essential for the survival of the settlers in this area. So with that, I'm gonna head on out. I might try to go do something with this Bordner cabin, but I'm not quite sure yet if I'll just be done for the day. But that's the monument. Like I said, my dad used to bring me out here all the time, and never fully understood it back in the day because I was just a kid, but the significance of it. But this was a very significant fort, and pretty much none of them exist anymore today, but it's still cool that you have a monument like that to talk about the history and how important that was to the community. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, if I'm not going to do the Bordner cabin, which I'm not sure, I might go down Fort Indiantown Gap, and they have a lot of cool old tanks from World War II there, so I might stop by those and show them to you. So we'll see you about town. Hello again, and this is going to be in addition to the Fort Swatara. I had mentioned about the Swatara Gap, and this is one of those Pennsylvania historical signs, blue markers, which I actually want to do a series on these because it has some pretty cool, like, about certain people that are historically significant in places. So it talks about the Swatara Gap. This is a gap in the Blue Mountain named for Swatara Creek, a pass through which enemy Indians raided frontier settlements during the French and Indian War. Fort Swatara was built nearby to guard it. And that's just down that way, and then you go on to, I think it's a Bachman Road, or I'm trying to think what the name of the actual road is. It's not Bachman, it's something else. It starts with a B, but it's on Bordnersville Road. So it's maybe a mile down, going towards Lickdale, which would be south. And if you go north, which you're still not going to be able to see it, unfortunately, I may drive the van down a little further. You can get a view of the bridge over the Swati, which is the river that the Swatara Gap is named after. And it's a gap through the mountain range, and it was a pathway that the Indians used during the settlement raids. But it's just out that way, it's a narrow gap that was used during that period of time, and it had the Indian trails, and it was a pretty exciting time. So it's gonna be hard for me to get a direct view of that, because Route 81 actually goes right through there, and with the trees being full foliage, it's going to be sort of hard to see that. But we will stop here now. I may take another video quick of the bridge that goes across the Swati, so you can see that, and that'll be it. Thanks, everybody. So I decided I wanted to film the third part of this video for Fort Swatara Gap over again, because the first one I didn't get this plaque down very good. So I want to get this filmed again so you can actually see what it is actually saying. I'm here in a little town called Inwood. It's right in between Lickdale and Greenpoint. I always thought that was a cool feature on that house, old house here in Inwood. But I'm here at the Inwood Iron Bridge. There used to be an old iron bridge here, and it had fallen into disrepair, so they eventually took it down and replaced it, and it got taken somewhere to be a bridge across, like a walking bridge. And they have down a little further here, you have the Waterville Bridge, which I will take a picture of and talk to you a little bit about that, because that actually was brought down from up in northern Pennsylvania in Waterville, and we actually used to go across that bridge when we went up to Lycoming County to go bear hunting. They had a hunting cabin up there, and some friends had, and we'd go up there. But it's a pretty neat bridge, but they brought it down here, so they had a crossing for the Appalachian Trail hikers to get across the Swati, because the only place they could really cross was where this bridge originally was, and it was sort of dangerous to be doing it that way. But apparently they took the old Inwood Iron Bridge, so I didn't know that they took it actually down further down the stream. I didn't realize that, so I had to check that out at some point. Anyways, they have this here that it has a bunch of different history on it. It's a historic transportation gateway through the Blue Mountains from the Great Valley into the anthracite coal region. Because this is like right along here, this is actually where the old railroad used to go through. My dad and his sister just said when they were kids, like Lebanon was the big shopping town, or maybe to go to Pottsville, and the railroad back then, it took, you know, like the 30s and stuff, like it would take passenger train yet. So they would go down through from Pine Grove Ravine, and they'd be able to go down to Lebanon through this rail transportation system. And my friend Cliff, one of the woodsmen, and I, we had hiked along this, and there's a wall right along the road there. They had a lot of little small stations where the train would stop to pick up people in these small towns, because, you know, back then you just had transportation with like vehicles and stuff like that. Motor vehicles was just really coming into its own, and so people still took the train quite a bit, and there were still people using wagons and whatnot. So it was, you know, that was a way, like if you had to go much further, it was a way to actually be able to get around. So I'll read some of this off for you. Early history. Over thousands of years, the Swatara Creek cut its way through the southernmost ridge of the Appalachian Mountains, breaking into the Great Valley on its way to the Susquehanna River. Swatara Gap, which is right out that way, which we were talking about, which I go on the bridge, I can take a picture of that, because you can get an idea. Route 81 now goes through there. But Swatara Gap, the narrow hollow created by a fast-moving creek, enabled a footpath for Native Americans migrating north and west. A path from the Tulpehocken area went to the Delaware settlement at Shamokin. During the first half of the 18th century, Germanic settlers populated the hills and valleys south of the gap. The Swatara Moravian Church was established
about 1740 as a missionary outpost. With the outbreak of the French and Indian War in 1755, the area south of Swatara Gap, known as the Hole, was targeted by Indians familiar with its strategic position. Here they talk about Fort Swatara. Located just northwest of Lickdale, Fort Swatara was erected to protect settlers and the path through Swatara Gap area during the French and Indian War. The 1756 fort largely consisted of a palisade surrounding Captain Peter Hetrick's log house and barn. So there's, like I said over there, a lot of them were just a normal house. Some of them were stone, some were log, but they weren't anything like, not what you would really think of as a fort. A number of settlers were killed in the vicinity of the fort between 1756 and 1758, and a few lie buried in the Moravian Cemetery, the Moravian Cemetery is one that we just filmed, and there was actually 4 gentlemen that were plowing their fields, and they all died on the same day, and they're buried there, which that's something I want to add to that. But yeah, it's just pretty unique, and I guess 3 Indians were killed in that raid as well, and they're buried in that cemetery at some place. The water transportation was something we're going to film here in a little bit, the Union Canal, what's left there. Swatara Creek, known for its abundant shad prior to 1800, Swatara is taken from a Native American name meaning where we fed on eels. A 72-mile long tributary of the Susquehanna River, the Swatara rises in the mountains of central Schuylkill County, passing through Swatara Gap. It travels southwest to its confluence with the Susquehanna at Middletown. The Union Canal, completed in 1827, the Union Canal main branch connected the Schuylkill River at Reading with the Susquehanna River at Middletown. The navigable feeder branch, completed in 1830, ran along the Swatara Creek from Pine Grove, Schuylkill County, to the Union Waterworks, Lebanon County. The Big Dam and Swatara Gap provided water for the canal's main branch and also allowed coal to be brought down to the Lebanon County iron furnaces. The Great Flood of 1862 permanently destroyed the Big Dam and canal locks along the feeder branch. So I'm going to read some more here. Actually, I talk about it here, the Inwood Station. Lebanon and Tremont branch of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad. In 1866, the Union Canal Company sold the right-of-way of the largely destroyed feeder branch canal running from Pine Grove to Jonestown. Local Lebanon entrepreneurs created the short line Lebanon and Tremont Railroad, which opened for traffic in 1870. The Lebanon and Tremont Railroad operated for nearly 100 years until its abandonment after 1965. Here they talk about the Inwood Station, and they have a picture of it right there. Built in 1872 on the Lebanon and Tremont Railroads, Inwood Station provided a rail connection for Swatara Gap from which lumber and coal shipped. During World War II, the siding at Inwood was used to park refrigerator cars for the 28th Infantry at Indiantown Gap. And that's actually, that picture is a 1910 view of Inwood Station. And there's that marker. Now it's so overgrown, but back then it was, a lot easier to see the thing. That's what I remember as a kid. Road and highway transportation. The State Route 72, which is what we're right next to, and Pennsylvania Highway Route 443 from Lickdale to Pine Grove was transformed from a gravel service to a poured concrete service as part of Governor Gifford Pinchot's program to get the farmer out of the mud. Established Inwood House is established following the Civil War. The Inwood House, a hotel and tavern, was operated by members of the Core family until 1896, which I think a number of the Core family are buried over at that Moravian Cemetery. The bank frame building later had a restaurant on ground level. The hostelry served travelers on road and rail line between Lebanon and Pine Grove. And they talk about Route 81, roughly traveling in a southwesterly direction. I-81 largely traces the paths developed over the years down the lengths of the Appalachian Mountains by migrating animals, Native Americans, and early settlers. By the late 1960s, construction had begun on sections going through Lebanon County. In 1975, the section crossing the Susquehanna River was completed, which I sort of wonder if they mean the Swatara Creek. because that's the bridge there as it goes across. And then they talk about the Appalachian Trail. The route for the trail following the Appalachian Mountains from Maine to Georgia was completed in 1937 during the Great Depression. The 2,200-mile marked hiking trail is managed by National Park Service, United States Forest Service, and the Appalachian Trail Conservatory. So yeah. And then there's a little bit of a timeline here, which I'll put on, and you can look at. And they talk about Union Forge, which at some point I want to do a video on Union Forge. That was a pretty substantial operation. It was owned by the gentleman who owned Cornwall Iron Forge, which I think was considered one of the biggest, if not the biggest, iron forges in the country. So that's a pretty cool thing to see here. And we're gonna quick walk over on the Swatara Bridge. And like I said, I want to do a quick video that I'm gonna put on the Facebook page for the Waterville Bridge, which is I think that's the same bridge that we used to cross when I was a kid and we went up to Lycoming County to the bear camp, but I'm not entirely sure, because I'm not sure when it was actually taken down. But you know, it's been up for a while. It's a really pretty iron bridge, and it's a nice crossing, and I'll go and cross that so you can see the Swatara as it goes underneath. And then I want to do a video that'll go on YouTube on the Union Canal, what's left, because there's some pretty substantial ruins of it. Yeah, I mean, this has not been used for a very long time. It's not like the Union Canal Tunnel Park in Lebanon, where they preserved it and really are still taking care of it. Every now and then they have the days when they'll run a canal boat through the actual canal. This is no longer operational in any way. Maybe a little bit of water flows through it, but that's going up towards Swatara Gap. The bridge there, you can see that goes straight through Swatara Gap, and that was the pathway that the Indians used during the French and Indian War. And that's why they had to build Fort Swatara, because this area was pretty prime for being attacked. And as I said before, there's two sides to every story. We were on the Indians' land, so unfortunately in war, most times the people that get hurt and get killed are usually the innocents, and that's, you know, it's what happens.